we're looking today at something that I really enjoy. And I'm not saying that I don't enjoy it with the other parts that we ever present about, but the results plus and using it in different ways every single year, it feels like, and performance data. And I don't mean data just for the sake of data. I love it. And there's something about the fact that it really helps year on year my teaching, but also the students that are coming through for those GCSE exams. So myself and Mal, just put us up on the board there on the screen. We are teachers. I was literally in school half an hour ago. So was Mal. Literally jump in the car, get in the car, get home for a guaranteed signal, which is good because we had a power cut. At that point, I was at school just at the end of the day. We've got a backstory, we've got a history. We've done well with GCSE results over the years, but that's not just through luck, judgment. It's through having great teams around us, but also really knowing the exams inside out, but how and what we learn from each year inside out. And every year, no matter how many times we do it, there's always tweaks. There's always, I don't want to say room for improvement, because I don't like that phrase, because every year group is different. Every group of kids is different. Every schools have peaks and troughs. Every school feels that moment of, oh, we're not going to do as well as last year. Oh, we can beat last year. Those kind of results conversations. But no matter what part of that journey you're on as a school, if you can reflect on what last year's results were about, or the data, or the assessments, or how the students performed, it can always aid in somehow future year groups. And I think we utilize that well, and I think we have over the years. And it is myself and Mal constantly over the years questioning each other on what comes out, how are we doing that, why are things going well, why are we not doing so well on highest common factor, lowest common multiple. And I still remember it 4 years ago, 5 years ago, just before we went into lockdown, Mal questioning me, so why is that group not getting as good as that group on the lowest common multiple question? And that's the kind of stuff that can come from hopefully reminding us as a group here today on this session. Hopefully today you will have an idea on how to use Results Plus to look at the how to improve, learn from mistakes, but find out what is working and maybe what is not so working out there. And I know Mal always puts this, but first it is about the
It's
context.
yeah, so I'll always like to be the voice of sanity, I suppose. In terms of that it is all about context. The context I work in now is different to Seager's context, and it's different to the context for all of you out there listening it. So whilst we've spent what 15 16 years to working together, last 18 months we're now in separate schools, and everybody's context is different. So what I'm looking to get out of my data is slightly different from Seager. So we've both been in contexts where we needed massive improvements to get out of special measures, or to get out of RI, or to get out of national challenge as it was. And then some of you will be in contexts where you're almost, and it's not a derogatory term, you're almost caretaking, in that you're at the point where you are, I need to get more out of my boys, or I need to get more out of my PP kids, or I need to get more out of your subgroups. And so it is, the way you use data is different depending on your own context. So that's my health warning.
Another warning or reminder sounded like on Peaky Blinders there, but to get the Pearson Authenticator app on your phone. And I'm sure most of us in the room at some point has come across this. To get into the majority of Pearson's support or ongoing background systems, you do need to have this on your phone or at hand to be able to plug in when you log into your Results Plus. So don't forget to have the Pearson Authenticator app via the App Store for your provider for your phone. Right, what is Results Plus? Very, very whirlwind. Results Plus is the system that is behind the scenes that has all the data to be able to look at national figures, national pictures on the assessments for the most recent one. So if we think there is more to it, but essentially, if we're thinking about what we're talking about today, we can look at the November system, the November results. I think November is live in there now.
No,
If it's
January.
not, January, of course it's January. So at the moment it'll be the summer data that's in there. And then obviously when you get into January, and there is a certain date in January that you can start seeing any November resits and the November data in there. Very, again, whirlwind. Head towards Pearson Edexcel Online, Google it. That's the home screen. On there, you click onto, if you Google actually Results Plus, that's probably the easiest way to do it. Google Results Plus, follow the links that once you are logged in. Don't forget the Pearson Authenticator app. You will need your exam officer to have given you the click behind the scenes to get into it. So just have a quick word with your exam officer to make sure that you have got Results Plus checked against your name, and then you're in. We're going to be looking at the very top here today in terms of how to drive, look and analyze data. There is so much more it does. We do talk a little bit about some of the options a little bit later on, but essentially we're looking at that analysis, which is the top box once you're logged into Results Plus. Again, I'm doing this quite quick. I want to get into the nitty gritty of what we wanted to talk about today. Cohort results, bottom left-hand tile. Cohort paper analysis, and then you'll be facing with this. If your school does different qualifications with Pearson, so Spanish, PE, business, for example, make sure you're clicking on the maths. But also, bear this in mind, if you see that, and sometimes you don't know this, when you log in and have a look and you do see other subjects in there, share what you are seeing today with those subjects, because I guarantee as a maths cohort, we are so, and I'm not, again, this is not derogatory in the slightest. I just think we have so much support and there is so much going on out there for maths, maybe because we are one of the headline measures, maybe because we are a core subject, I don't know, but we are a bit more savvy to what is out there than other subjects. So I know, for example, our PE, I'm speaking to our PE department on how to really use Results Plus. Share it, share what is available in your school for those Pearson subjects that are being used and examined within your school. So bear that in mind. Select the qualification, select the session. So obviously November won't be in there yet, but that'll be there at the top when that clicks in January. This is the one at the top at the moment, June 24, and then GCSE Maths. View paper analysis over on the right for click number 4 on that screen. That's the landing page analysis, but we're going to be looking at the highlight report session on the right today. When you're on the analysis and that first page, Mal's going to talk about that a little bit later on in terms of this holistic view of whether you break down into paper. I go into it a little bit throughout my session and my case study as well, but we're going to be looking at the highlight reports shortly when we get there. I think, Mal, this is where you really like to open up and have a look at that tiering, the foundation versus the higher. Particularly, this is where you've quizzed me over the years, the highest common factor, lowest common multiple, when you can see them side by side, and I know that's your gem there.
Yeah, so I'll show you a bit when we get to our little case study at the end. But there is so much data that's there, and the one for me that on the main screen where we went to the bottom left, the first thing I do is I download the data, and I import it into my own question level analysis sheet, and I then distribute that to the team. That's done in August, ready for them to come back in September. More to do with the fact that most teachers will want to have a look at each kid's performance. They can see it, he got 132, but for some teachers, they want to go into quite more in-depth We used to do that when we did resits, when there was early entry, but I got into the habit of still doing that post an exam and sharing it with the team just so they can see how their own students performed, rather than just giving them headline figures. So it takes me sort of 10 minutes just to copy it into I have a standardized spreadsheet. They put a student's number in and it pulls it all into one sheet and shows them the performance. So that's the first thing I do is that, but that's more about making teachers aware of, for those that are really conscientious teachers, they will go through and they'll find each of their students and go, oh, I thought they'd nail that question. And sometimes it's just a bit of just getting people to be conscious about their own group's strengths and weaknesses.
I know that when we come to the point of analysing internally the previous year's results, and if you've ever had a blip set of results, or results, you've joined a new school and not as good as where they want them to be, and your part of the role is to help them, and you're under scrutiny to get your results. Sorry, just closing my door. If you're under, I'm not going to say scrutiny, but it is part and parcel of the role to dig in a little bit more into previous results to make sure that we can make improvements. This kind of analysis, or this kind of quick look, can really help. Where are we compared to the national average on these questions? Now, just be careful. Red doesn't necessarily mean it's hugely an issue. It will flag up red if you are 0.5% under the national average on a 1-mark question, which is it's negligible. But it'll also go green on some of those as well if you are sitting that close to the national average. And sometimes on some areas you want to be strides ahead, or it's about picking your battles when it comes to your big quick look of colour. And I know that when you are talking to leadership teams, particularly the part of the leadership teams that are necessarily not to do with maths or maths savvy, colour means a lot. Green means a lot, and you've got to put it in context, going back to that word context, the question, the teaching, the area of the maths it's talking about, and also relative to how many marks that question is out of. So it's good at a glance.
Yeah, so at this point as well, you'll see right in the middle of that screen, it says Edexcel average all. That is a really interesting box to change. Again, context. So if you're in a school where you're looking for improving outcomes, because you want all you're interested in, because it is of the way grading works, you're interested in beating other schools, beating the national picture. But for those of you that are talking about tweaking your results and your subgroups, you can toggle that to be absolute values. So there are 2 ways of viewing the data. One is against every other school that sat the Edexcel papers, and one is about the absolute values. So just be aware of that. We always use Edexcel average because of the kind of schools we work in, where it is about massive impact. But if you, like I say, if you're already in a high performing school and you're just talking about continually improving and you just want them to get better and better, that's where you would look at that absolute values.
I've moved more and more to using Results Plus to show the kids. Okay, obviously you're talking about data of a year group with a year group that's left. And we used to use it quite a lot, like Mal said earlier, when we had a resit group, and you can look back over that analysis. And anyone there that's with a school or a sixth form and you require previous data, there is back on that starting page, one of the options is to be able to find the data from other students that are a part and parcel of your college sixth form. But in terms of that Edexcel average and talking about average, the kids love to see it. So showing your current year 11 now this data and saying, on average, we did well on this one. On average, we didn't do very well on this one. Can you do this question? And for us, the reflex angle that was on question 2 or 3 this summer, we were about 68% lower than the national average on that question. I just didn't talk about the names of angles, but it was also the worst answered question nationally on that paper anyway. So not only was our centre bad at it, nationally it was a badly answered question. And I love sharing that data with the kids. Incidentally, I've shown them at the end of year 10 last year. or was it the start of this year? No, it was the start of this year because I would have had the data. And not one of them got it in that group either. So it is obviously something that is just, I'm not saying it's a misconception because it's not. It's just an area of maths that we generally, probably as a country, haven't gone back over, recapped, looked at in its entirety that we have done in comparison to some of the other areas of maths. But anyway, right, where are we? So going over to the highlight report, and then what you've got the option for is any number up to 10 of your best answered questions, again, raw score or in relation to Edexcel average, and your worst answered. And I say worst answered, it's obviously worded in areas to improve. Now you can have them as skills, or if you scroll down a little bit further, you can have them as questions. So what I'm going to look at with my case study shortly, so we've got mine and Mal's case study in terms of not necessarily different case studies, but how an element we could look at it from that I've looked at with my school recently, which Mal's doing as well, but Mal then also is going to look at a slightly different area of it in terms of a case study that she's recently looked at. And I'm going to try and do both the skills and the questions within my part. So we've got by skill, by question, areas to improve, but also areas that are to celebrate. And you can drill down per paper with the questions when you actually choosing the questions option. When it's skills, and again, I'm going to put a word of warning as we move through this, be careful. That's all I'm going to say. You'll see it in a minute. Have the papers ready too. So have the papers on the screen, have the papers printed out, so you can make reference back to what was that question. And I would love the opportunity to be able to toggle to see the actual image of the question. And I have fed that back to Pearson, whether it's something that can be done with the size of the package that Results Plus is or not, I don't know. But I would love to have that option to see it there and then at the same time. But having them downloaded, printing is not a huge issue at the same time anyway. So my case study, my data, the way we are at the moment with my scenario at my school. So I'm at a school, Ridgeway Secondary School. It's completely open in terms of conversations, how we're doing, what we're doing. I have been the head of department, head of maths there for coming up to in January 2 years, and I started in January. Yeah, starting in January is very tough, guys. Anyone who's done that out there, it is very, very tough. I couldn't do much in January once you started for that year group. So my first set of results, if you like, was what come out this summer. So historically, the school was a middle school that converted to be a secondary school, not necessarily by choice, by the way that the area dictated it. So Redditch is a middle school system. One school went maverick and said, we're going to change to be a secondary. If that happened, the school that Ridgeway is would have been possibly defunct, not needed because of the way of the demographics. It converted also to be a secondary school. Luckily, we're right on the border between Worcestershire and Warwickshire, where there are other secondary schools and primary schools. But the school was put into special measures. So we are a special measures school. We are doing anything and everything. We have got a little mockstead, if you like, where we've got some external visitors coming in tomorrow and Thursday to give us some guidance, some help. And I do look at it that way. I don't look at it as in another thing that's going on. I look at it in as what we have in support with. But historically, the GCSE results were coming out about 55% 4 plus, minus 0.9 progress 8. We have now hit 81% 4 plus, with a progress 8 of positive 0.65. And I put looking at data, learning curves, sharing with the department, sharing with the kids, this kind of stuff, one of the massive successes to how we have made a significant gains. And I truly believe we are now at the point where Ofsted can come in and give us a blessing that we are doing the right thing going forward, and the students can start choosing us and the parents can choose us as a school. But we do look at stuff in terms of the data and build on it and go forward. Right, we're going to look at the top questions from my year group for foundation, but then the top skills and so top, I'm going to say worst, well, it's easier. Top and worst questions for foundation, top and worst skills for higher. So I've kept it with the top 5 for now, but then I do look at, in particular, when it comes to some of the questions too, just for time for today. What was it that did really, really well? What was it that really stood out for our questions to celebrate with foundation? Anything to the power of 0 is 1. I chant it to the students. When I have all of the students for after school revision, intervention, a walking, talking, mocking their core PE session, and I was allowed to do that every now and again, I would shout it. Anything to the power of 0 is 1. And we massively, as you can see there, 60% above the national average on that question. It works. My chanting, my calling out to the kids when we're on the corridor, anything to the power of 0 is 1. 60% above the national average. The next top one on foundation was a chord, 55% above the national average for remembering the word chord. And I don't know what it is on this one, but every time I do 1 to 10, and Mal backs me up on this, I love doing 1 to 10, calling out 10 questions. And I put it under the visualizer. It's not necessarily calling out, but anything to the power of 0 is 1, write it down. And it might be, I've drawn a picture, what's this called? And I learned from the chord one years ago when that cropped up. And it's just little images and putting it under my visualizer, and that being part of the 1 to 10. And as I bet you can remember from about 5 minutes ago, what my new one is that I put under that visualizer for the 1 to 10. It's a reflex angle, an obtuse angle, a right angle, an acute angle, because I've been stung and I'm not going to be stung again on that one.
I think that comes back to the original one where in 2017, for the first time, it was, and this is to prove the point how the chord is now part of his repertoire. Nationally, we all got stung about what is the name of the line that touches the circle, and it was a tangent. And from that point on, we're like, we've got to get this repetition down of the recall of the basic facts, because this isn't going to happen again. And that's exactly where that chord and diameter and radius comes from. It was the tangent question.
Absolutely. And the repetition Mal mentioned there, it is repetition. Because how many times do you say to yourself as a practitioner, as a head of department, as a teacher, as whatever we are listening here today, I taught you this yesterday. We did this last week. I told you this last year. It's not through any fault. It's just what sticks is repetition and constantly seeing it, talking about it. And that's what comes through with my top 5, 10. It's the repetition, the stuff that I have gone back over again and talked about and mentioned and made reference to, not from just year 11, year 10, year 9. The 1 marker starter questions that are on the Emporium, email me, I'll put it at the end if you want me to direct you where they are. There's a selection of all the 1 mark questions that's been from 2017 to 2024 as questions on one little sheet, 10 at a time. So there's 20 starters. Start them in year 9, go through them again in year 10, show them in year 11. It's constantly seeing these 1 markers, because not only is it great to become brilliant at that topic area or get 60% better than the national average, that you can tell the next year's cohort we are, it's about the fact that they start these exams with such a confidence that it builds and builds and builds as they're working through that exam. And confidence builds success naturally. The buzz they're getting off seeing a chord and writing it down makes them more likely to want to see that next question. But then obviously there are, sorry, Mum.
No, so that exclamation mark, the worst there, that negatives, does that make you think about what you need to do to go back to your key stage 3 schemes of work, about how do we make sure that, because I will say to students that it's not that you can't factorize. When today I've been expanding double brackets with year 9, it's not that you can't expand, because look, you've just expanded them both with positives. It's the negatives that will make the mistakes on, and separating the 2 different skills, because negatives is something that we've got to embed within schemes of work nationally and get them really, really good at it.
Absolutely. And my year 7s, I've been there for 2 years now. I like to think that the scheme of work that I've brought in, and it's nothing maverick, it's nothing amazing. It's just that it enables the repetition to happen from Key Stage 3 all the way down from that year 7 on arrival, that we're talking a bit more about. The fact that they bring in that phrase, 2 negatives makes a plus, but they don't know where. It's just 2 negatives. It could be 2 negatives in a whole long line of an algebraic expression. But the fact that it's understanding it a little bit more, and we know that no matter what topic area it is that enables it to go up a notch when you throw the negatives in, and I'm thinking about factorising quadratics as a perfect example, you can teach that skill, but when it becomes with negatives, it throws completely. And it's a building in that support.
Yeah, so I did with all of my year groups in the last 4 weeks using zero sum pair counters, where you've got a positive and a negative counter and they cancel each other out, and did all 4 operations with them. And for some students, particularly my year 11s, I hadn't taught the year 11s before. I could see on their mocks that I've marked last night where some of them are drawn counters for the negatives because they're remembering that better than they are any arbitrary rules where there wasn't an understanding. But the whole idea, so if you're struggling with the negatives, look at zero sum pair counters. It really works with some students. I almost wish that for some of those students, if they'd had a concrete method for negatives lower down the school, the 2 negatives make a positive, they can get to that if they've got a concrete understanding. So that's got to come sooner. So definitely look at zero sum pairs.
And then there will be elements of your areas to improve that you just know that maybe wasn't done as well as you wanted to, and it wouldn't need to have been in a data analysis sheet to tell you that. You would have known it. And factorising is one of those areas. So I inherited this group at the end of year 10, going into year 11. I wanted to cover everything, and I'm being brutally honest, factorising wasn't high on my agenda to make sure it was done perfection, because there were so many other areas. So you've got to look at it within actually a training model. Right, we are going to do better at this, but also within a time model. Actually, now I know that this will be better and part and parcel of my plan, because it is going to be, particularly in my scenario, I had minimal time with those students. I didn't have the full suite of the 5 years. Top 5 questions there in terms of foundation, but we're going to look at skills for foundation, and it is the questions for high. Apologies. So there are my top 5 areas. There are my worst 5 areas when it comes to foundation. What I do like is that my top 5 area skills have very significant positive percentages, whereas my worst 5 skills, my areas to improve, are not necessarily significant percentages. Okay, they're 8%, 5%, 2%, but they are nothing like what I am doing at the other end. So what I've got, hopefully, in terms of success, if I bring a little bit of that to these areas, I should be able to bring them back into in line with and possibly exceeding the average for my areas to improve. So I took that as a positive, and that's what I want. I want to look for the positives within this data, not necessarily all about the reds and the negatives. It's about what can I do within those reds and that area that I want to improve. So the top 5 skills that came out from mine: sequences. So it says there, the nth term of a sequence, sequences. That's paper 1. So I went back, found the question, looked at with the kids in terms of my year 10s. Are we there as well? Am I at a position to still be a very good outcome for that area? Yes, I am. This surprised me, actually, looking at the question, because I was worried when I saw it. It's compound interest, but with people, with humans. And that actually comes out as 37% above the national average on that particular, and it is question, even though it's a skill. And I'm going to explain that in a little bit. In fact, I think it might be the next slide. We've got to be careful with this. It's a skill area, but when you look at it on this particular sitting, it was that question. So compound interest.
So sometimes the skills are made up of multiple questions, and sometimes they aren't, depending on the papers.
And you'll see that rumble shortly in my
Yeah.
next part. My third part was graphical work, and we've got the I've done very, very well, hopefully coming through. And I'm going to put that down to, I've got to be honest with you, I really, really trained and worked hard with the students the table function on a calculator. And if it's something you don't know about, again, I'll give you my email. Give me a quick conversation. And this is what me and Mal do. We're classed as credible specialists for Pearson because we're in the classroom doing the job, that we can reach out and help from the exam board's point of view, but we are doing the job. And just before, the reason why Andrew, very, very grateful again, reminded me that actually you're on today and I put Wednesday in my planner, was because we were following up in part of our credible specialist role, and we are there to help and talk and share ideas. So another one, and okay, it's, I think it's paper 1, I can't see, no, it's paper 3. So my students utilising that table mode within the calculator, 2 questions, paper 2, paper 3, doing very, very well on those. Again, happily to share that. And then my 5th best answered skill area was similarity for that particular question there. So my top 5 skills for foundation, although it's a skills, actually relate to questions. So skill area 3 there was for quadratic and cubic. Skill area 4 was for linear graphs. And then skill area 5 was similarity. My worst answered, so the worst skills, 1 was factorising, which actually goes back to 1 question on paper 3. And again, I knew that it was an area that we didn't look into. And I've put a big careful warning here. My second worst skill was this, angles. And it's actually not just angles. What it comes under is, and I think if I go back, we can see it, conventional geometric terms and notation. So I dig into it a little bit more through Results Plus. And it's that question. It's the reflex angle question. But be careful when you go and look at it, the other part of that skill that was assessed on paper 2, paper 1 actually, I think, draw a hexagon, we were 8% above the average. It is not necessarily that skill area I need to address. It's drilling a little bit more. It's actually the recall of the angles that I need to address, not necessarily that skill area.
So would you suggest then looking at questions rather than skills?
I think I do both. I like looking at the skills to get that overall judgment and feel which area is it and which area the kids seem to find. But then I like to drill a little bit more into the question. So a little bit of both, but for me, question is my favourite. Yeah, definitely question. I think that's the same for you, Mel, because that's what we've talked about in the past.
And there's some you disregard, like that angles one, because you go, yeah, that's an easy fix.
Yeah, absolutely. Factorising because of time and all of that kind of stuff. Paper 1 question, 25 part B, I think it is there. Write down the equation of a straight line parallel to it was another area that we were off. But again, we're talking minimal off the national average. It's a tough concept. I am a bit frustrated with question 4 there that you can see, which is my 5th worst answered area or skill, which is some algebra. And again, it was only 1 question that formed part of that. But then solving inequalities was my 4th worst. But again, we're talking quite low differences between the averages now. But look at that. That is a tough one to deal with foundation anyway. It's a tough question, I think, that one.
The one that again links into lower down the school is that simplify one, that number 5, simplify 7A. That's a skill from year 7, 8, 9, really, isn't it? That is about being embedded. So it's a similar thing to the negative numbers, embedding those basic skills with and not necessarily something that is a year 11 thing. It's just you've got to make sure that they nail it lower down the school.
What I would love to find is what the common answer is to that. When they're seeing multiple A's, are they putting A cubed and all of that kind of stuff? What is it that actually is making And that's where access to scripts is great, and you can go and have a look at some of those key students on what they are putting for their answers there. But Mal, you hit the nail on the head, and I'm glad you'll mention it at those kind of times, because I'm looking at that right now, recapping this presentation that we put together over the last few weeks, looking at that going, why is that? And it is something that is not a year 11 thing. This is, and my year 7s right now, I'm confident with the methods that we're drilling in, the chopping up and making it a nice big juicy chop line, that everything's got a positive or negative sitting in front of it, and you go through and tell the story. 7A, I'm starting with £7, I'm adding £1 on, £8, and you're doing it in chunks. I'm confident that is more of a glitch in where I am in the journey of the school rather than an issue within our teaching. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And so there's some that you don't want to linger over.
Absolutely. There's our top 5 and worst 5 skills at higher. Slightly, I'm not going to brag about this, but my group was the foundation group. Higher is always going to open up a little bit more of a gulf anyway, because you have those lower hires. I know you have lower foundation, higher, but you always have those that cluster there that is just stepping into higher, that can send a bit of a gulf between some of the skill areas anyway, because of what you end up focusing on as you are building from your mocks up until the exams. So,
and that's, again, that's context specific, isn't it? That's dependent on you. If you're a school that's just making that move to shifting more to higher, and over time that your top 5 skills would get better and your worst 5 skills would get less worse.
Absolutely. You'd love to be that there isn't a, it's, well, no, everything's green. That's what we always want, don't we? But, there you go. So digging into those and having a look, but I want to look at the questions for higher. So we're looking at it in that other way, not necessarily skills, looking at the questions. I've only put 2 here for each paper rather than digging into all 5. You can choose 1, 2, 3 up to 10. I've gone for 2 here just to get the generic idea of what we're talking about, to aid and I suppose aid understanding of the papers, understanding the questions, what the national averages are, all of that kind of stuff. And I think we can get that with 2. So if we have a quick look at, as a case study again, my school, our best answered, 2 on each paper. And why? What is it? So paper 1, histograms. Why histograms? That's actually quite a high level bit of maths. It's not your go to instantly, like your cumulative frequency or your product of prime factors, or your frequency polygons. And it's because we really did drill in, particularly with our lower higher tier students, histograms. It was one of the ones that we really did as I suppose in depth, close to the exam as well, and went over it. But then what is it about triple brackets that makes us do well? Actually, it's not hugely well. It's 7% above the national average, so it's there or thereabouts, but it is something we can celebrate. We're doing well. We're looking at methods. We do the parrot method, we do the grid method, we do both. What's the best for you? And that seems to have come through from when I've gone into the scripts of the students as well on Script Viewer, particularly for that question. What is it that made us that did okay on that? Whereas algebra feels like a bit of a theme across foundation and higher of something we didn't do that well. Why is it that part of algebra we did? It was more the method that we were looking at that the kids seemed to jump on and like, which was the parrot. And if you want to know what I mean by the parrot method, drop me an email. But parrot for double brackets, then going into grid for triple. Paper 2, 17.5% higher when we've come to using interquartile. So it's part C, using interquartile range. So we're great at using interquartile range. So we really do well with cumulative frequency, but not only stopping and just thinking about cumulative frequency, we share what it talks about, what it is, and heavily link cumulative frequency to box plots, always teaching those together in terms of how the data works and what it's showing. And incidentally, I was showing stem and leaf diagrams today to year 9, so I got them to do interquartile range, and it's only just talking about it now. Actually, this is another reason why we're doing well at it. because I was bringing it into quartile range with my year 9s while we've got the opportunity with some basic data. We've done well there on the right-hand side with the multiple parts, the ratio, fractions of amount, percentages, because again, throwing in all the time those questions, that constant recall, fractions of an amount. I'll say, what do we do? And they chant back to me, divide by the bottom times by the top. This constant conversation of how to do it. How do we find 12.5%? Divide by 100 times by 12.5. Okay, it's a calculator method, but this is a calculator paper we're looking at. So constant repetition works, and it really does. And then on paper 3, functions. And it was really one the students seemed to buy in, 13 and 12% above the average. Please do remember part C, though. We're going to come back to that shortly. The worst answered, and we can see some real big percentages here. What is it we're not looking at or going over? Some of them is because it's the extreme. Some of them stand out like a little bit of the training that we need to look at in the departments. Again, 6 part B, we're not doing well compared to the average on foundation, but also on higher, even more so. What is it about straight lines and knowledge of straight lines that we're not developing as much as we could? We are incidentally running the extended math certificate at our school, which really is proving its worth in gold in terms of supporting the GCSE. Again, if anyone wants any more information on how that qualification works, it is an absolute gem to help out with your higher tier and your top end. Then when it comes to 19% lower than national average on a real tough probability question, actually, I will take that at this point in my scenario at my school with only 2 years in and understanding and getting that deeper understanding of math. So I'll take that.
Yeah. Yeah, you take that now, but in 5 years' time, I'd be saying to you, but have you done the Hannah Sweets question? Because that's the basis of that question, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
that's part of your journey that you're on. So don't beat yourself up if you're listening to this similarly, going, just because we're calling them the worst. It is about where are you in your journey. Some of you should be doing the Hannah Sweets question, but I'd be saying to Seager, yeah, you've done the right thing by focusing on the histograms, those high frequency topics that you know are going to come up time and time again.
So I think I even make reference to what Mal just said then, high frequency. Inverse proportion, but in terms of more equations and formula, that's an easy fix. We did not do it. As part and parcel of building our department, we got the language going this year, inverse proportion, direct proportion, scaling up, scaling down. But in terms of, I suppose, introducing the fish and the formula, that is our next phase. So I take that one completely. I knew that the second I saw the question. So I will take that. But then coming back to this one, part A and part B, and understanding functions, we have nailed, we have got it, we're above the average. But then the same students fell off and become significantly under the average when it goes with the inverse function. And again, it's part and parcel of where we are with the students that we've got and the 2 years into this journey, and my team working, I say my team, the team working together to know what's the next step naturally. And this proves a point. We are part and parcel along that journey. We've got functions nailed. Right, what's the next bit? Let's look at inverse functions. So it's interesting that I've got the extremes within one question on one paper within one sitting there to talk about with you today.
Brill. So in terms of, so Seager's shown you the real depth that you can get to in terms of looking at each questions. The other way to look at it is a bit more of a holistic view. So based on, I go in a couple of days after the results when it's first available. I leave it a day or two. Once the madness dies down, you can actually get onto Results Plus. And I literally just screenshot. Do I zoom in on this, Seeger, on the next slide? Yeah, so I literally screenshot that for every paper, not downloading it, screenshot it, crop as an image for each paper. I'd stick it on a PowerPoint slide. and just to show the overall performance of our cohorts for all of the 6 papers. And where it's not green, I will then take the PDF of the paper and screenshot the image. Again, on the next slide, I think you will see where I've added the question. And that is part of one of our first bits of CPD we did this year as a department. Literally and allowed us to have, it was timely, it allowed us to have conversations. So something like this about why did we underperform? Yes, it's only 1%, but we have to sweat the small stuff. With our foundation kids, given the context we're in, and some of you will already have fixed this. For us, it's something as easy as, well, maybe not just tracing paper needs to be on desks, maybe rulers need to be on desk, because and it's something we've always done in the past where we've had exam packs. Every school I've worked in has had exam packs. Loads of you will do that already, so that won't be an issue. But sometimes as teachers, and again, it's not a very middle class, we don't understand some of our PP's situation where we're asking them to come into school with a ruler, and some of the kids don't know where they're sleeping tonight. So we should have this facility. And yes, and some people argue, oh yeah, they get given all this, but their lives are in disarray. And so that's the level of detail I go into with my team. So screenshotting them, adding the questions. If you just flick through Seager for each of the papers, and that's it. And just having the discussion as a team to allow us. So what is it about some of these topics that we're not performing well on, or we are performing well on? They're not all green, I have to hasten to add. And if you just go back to the overview of all of the previous one, keep going back, and one more, that one there, and you'll see there's paper 1, paper 2. It probably took me 25 minutes to produce, and you'll see that on the first paper there was 1, 2, 3, 4 questions that enabled us to have those conversations, not just as a part of the department leadership team, but the whole department getting in. Oh yeah, this is what I did with my transformations. I produced this booklet and it made sure that we did all of these. There was lots of repeated practice. So some of it we were able to solve by putting in place some big picture stuff with the departments, with the school, in terms of making sure they've got equipment. Some it is then down to what we do as a classroom. Some of it has been down to when did we last teach? For example, that angles one came up for us as well. And were you to look at all of our best and worst, they're very similar to Seager's, which is quite interesting. And there's some that you go, oh, it was that angles one, or it was the measuring the line one. The frustrating thing with the measuring the line one is that when you look at kids that didn't get the grade 4 by 1 or 2 marks, and they're not getting that measuring a line one, then it becomes the point where you know, actually, this is important because it's impacting on students' outcomes. And I know students should be able to measure a line.
If you want to go in a bit more detail and look in Results Plus for maybe grouping, comparing your groups, you can go in and create and edit a group, so you can tell Results Plus that these students would have been in 11Y1, 11Y2, so you can have a look at band. But that's going into the nitty-gritty behind what you can do with Results Plus. But again, feel free to contact us if you want a little bit more information on that.
My feeling about that, Seager, is that it almost feels sometimes that you could, if you allowed yourself, get into analysis paralysis, where you're looking at too much data because it's in the past. And you almost go, so for me, again, it's context. I want big impact stuff. What do I know that can make a difference today? And then move on.
The one thing I do like about the grouping is if something stands out that one teacher is doing brilliantly on, what resource, what is it they use that could be shared across the department to help every group get that well on that element or that skill area. And likewise, if one group flags up as not being great, and the great thing is everyone has winners and losers within a group in terms of greens and reds, and if there's something that is not great, is there something within the department that could help, not external, within your department? Is there a skill, or even if it just might be a great worksheet that someone has that you never know about, that could help? That's the bit I like for that. I don't really want to go into the whole analysis of it, but it could highlight up those little small wins. So is there a
Yeah, and
theme or something like that?
yeah,
Yeah.
and the one for the question I did ask this year was, of the ones that we need to improve, how many of them were new topics to the GCSE? So how are we doing on things like iteration? How are we doing on all of the new topics that were introduced back in 2017? And that was an interesting question to ask as well.
Yeah. And then you can ask things like, are we good at the crossover? Are we successful at the crossover? Do these students feel comfortable starting off the higher paper? Do they feel comfortable finishing off the higher? So you can ask yourself these kind of questions. Is there misconceptions that are running through the department? Is it misconceptions compared to the national average? We talk about the reflex angle, etc. there as another kind of, okay, that's highlighted up that we just don't cover that kind of maths again during year 11, 10, possibly even year 9. For some reason, there we go. This is worth a look, and Mal spends hours doing this after every sitting and pulling in the topic areas. Now, this is not a cheat sheet, this is just the frequency of what areas crop up. And I know that we get a lot of requests for a little nose at this. This is something Mal pulls together. This is useful for us, and I know Mal uses it for almost like an after-school revision kind of tick on our desk when we used to work together. Have we gone over and recapped these because they're real high hitters? And it's interesting that you start seeing things like the histograms, like Mal mentioned earlier, which makes reference to the fact that, yeah, there it is on our little revision tick sheet. Nothing to do with our direction of our teaching. We teach, we cover the maths, but as a bit of a guidance to go back over, look at, this is a brilliant little bit of a document that Mal, like I said, spends hours of her life pulling together.
Yeah, so when it comes to frequency analysis, and there are others out there, so bear it in mind, we don't use it to teach to, but for guiding things like revision sessions, booster sessions, after whatever you call them, and making sure that you have covered, but also chill out over something that is very unlikely to appear. Don't beat yourself up about it. The use of data's got to be supportive and not, it's very much got to be a carrot and not a stick. And I'm at this point just going to mention something else we've been doing for the last few years and this was an idea that originated with Nick from the Pearson team, where we produce and I put them onto a PowerPoint, the first 5 questions from higher, first 5 questions from foundation, and as part of this last probably 6-7 months with my year 11, I will show them the first 5 questions and compared with the national performance. And I'm saying, did we all get this one? Did we beat the national average on the metric measures question? And that's quite easy to do because you can use the skills map just to get the performance. But I also use it with my year 10, especially that group that you're selling the idea that they're capable of higher. Or that for some of you that might be year 9, saying, right, this is the start foundation, piece of cake, isn't it? But are you ready for a product of prime factors question as your first question? Have you got the emotional maturity to deal with it? And here's the first 5 questions for that. And that's quite easy to do. So a nice use of data in the classroom as well.
A lot of the stuff we've talked about and mentioned, one marker starters, for example, theme papers, the Emporium is an absolute gem of resources to go and have a look into. So please, if you want a little bit more guidance of stuff that we use in there, drop us an email. Just conscious of the time, we're going to flick over a couple of these here. We've got marking guidance that myself and Mal run sessions looking at, and I know Mal spent a long time getting the updated version for the 2024, so there are exemplars now available for the 2020, and again, have a look at that in the Emporium. But it's also sessions that we could run for schools, maths, if you want us to go into the mark scheme in a little bit more detail. We've mentioned access to scripts. If you want a bit more support on how to utilise that, please drop us an email. We can go into that. And there is a session that we look at, Results Plus Access to Scripts, which is a timely reminder that that's available in the PD Academy as well. Exam Wizard, build exam papers, practice papers with mark schemes, with examiners' reports. You've got us at Pearson, myself and Mal. You can come to our school. The teacher I was talking about earlier that reminded me about this session is going to come and have a look at our school and how we're teaching. We're there. We will help however we possibly can. And we love to take a couple of golden nuggets away from you, as much as hopefully share some with teachers in sessions like this. This session is actually part of a pack of 3, using data and then a deep dive into the data. The first session, which we've got booked in for the 15th of January, I believe, which we're going to look at a deep dive into ratio and proportion. Based off, it's an area of maths that seems to be nationally not done very, very well, particularly when you delve into the data on Results Plus. So we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into that. The second one after that, the second deep dive, which I think is penciled in for a date in March, I think, we're going to open it up to what we think is that you would like us to deep dive into and look at. So we're going to ask that anyone that signs up for the 15th of Jan, please be prepared just to type in the chat, give us an idea on what area that your results is showing may need a bit of a deep dive into and look at. And then we're going to design that second session, which will be in March, so the third of the pack, into what we can do as a group of teachers, not just me and Mal saying it. So Results Plus has dictated ratio and proportion, then we as a group, all of us, for the next one after that. Hopefully that's made sense.
Yeah, because we're really conscious that when we did some network meetings a few years ago, back in the day when we used to go out and do them, that when the national data was showing, oh, AO3 problem solving needs to be improved, everybody would go out and use lots more problem solving questions, and then the next year AO2, the reasoning, the explanation questions would drop. So, and it is a case of you get what you measure. And so sometimes by focusing on just one area, that will improve to the detriment of something else. So if this is about getting other people's ideas about what else we can look at, and it might be something bizarre, it might be something quite mundane.
There's our email addresses. Please keep in touch. You've got your maths subject advisors, and partly you've got Vicky and Nicola, who are always ready. So teachingmaths@pearson.com. Really just get through and gets, and I think Vicky's been in the background, possibly on the chat as well.
No, she is. She's in the chat.
And please just keep in touch with us. That's what we're there for. I'll mention the extended math certificate. I'm not going to go into detail now, but please, that can really, really support your top end. And I've got kids buzzing with their top end maths because of this qualification. Again, drop me a message and I'll explain how we've used it. And there's lots of other bits and bobs that we've got going on, but conscious of time, thank you very much for listening.